Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV News. This is Mohammad Faisal with the top stories. First, the headlines. Terror probe begins in Nice attack. Obama responds to critics in conversation on race and police. EU stands with France, Tusk. US House passes Iran sanctions, financial service measures. Viewers, those are the headlines, now the details. The Paris prosecutor's office launches a terrorism investigation into the attack on the coastal city of Nice that killed scores of people watching a Ballistic Day firework display.
A fireworks display on Bastille Day along the French Riviera turned bloody in what is now being investigated as an extremist attack. A delivery truck plowed into a crowd of people on the French National Day celebration in Nice, killing at least 75 and wounding scores more, a local politician said. The long-distance delivery truck drove at high speeds, well over 100 meters along the famed Promenade d'Anglaise, mowing over the mass of revelers. Local French media, citing a prosecutor, say terrorist investigators have since taken over the Nice attack probe. Washington saying it appeared to be a, quote, terrorist attack. Social media video appeared to show lifeless victims lying in pools of their own blood. Witness Frank Sidoli describes the pandemonium immediately after the attack.
The emergency services turned up half an hour later. A truck smashed into everyone. There was no security. It took the firemen 25 minutes or half an hour to arrive. We were working. It happened there on the promenade. Afterwards, there were shots and everything.
Police shot and killed the truck's driver. French President François Hollande, who was in southern France at the time of the attack, rushed back to Paris, directly to the National Crisis Center. He had hours earlier said a state of emergency put in place after an attack on Paris 8 months ago would not need to be extended, only later to be hit with the news of yet another attack.
President Barack Obama on Thursday responded to critics who charged he has not done enough to show support for law enforcement officers after 2 years of protest against incidents of violence by police against the black community. Obama faced several points questions during a town hall broadcast on television network ABC, exploring the emotionally charged issue surrounding policing and racial discrimination in the United States.
Members of the general public paid their respects for slain Dallas police officer Michael Smith, one of 5 officers killed in last Thursday's shooting. The funeral was held a day after a more private service for his friends and family. Smith was killed by a gunman in Dallas toward the end of a Black Lives Matter protest. Authorities say the shooting by a 25-year-old U.S. veteran was a racially motivated ambush. Dallas Police Chief David Brown.
No more pain in heaven. No more suffering. No more racial division in heaven. No active shooters in heaven.
Funerals for the other 2 officers will be held later in the week. In Minnesota, it was the shooting death of Philando Castile that sparked new protests against police brutality across the U.S. He was the African-American man shot and killed by police during a traffic stop near Minneapolis a day before the Dallas shooting. His family says he had a permit to carry a concealed weapon and that he told police he was armed at the time of the shooting. Castile's funeral was held at the St. Paul Cathedral in Minnesota, where emotions are still raw.
The president of the European Council said Europe stands with the people of France after the deadly attack in Nice kills at least 75 people. Europe stands united with the French people and government in the fight against violence, European Council President Donald Tusk said on Friday after an attackers killed at least 75 people in the French Riverine city of Nice. Belgian Foreign Minister Didier Reynders describes the attack as barbaric. Both were speaking on the sidelines of a regional summit in the Mongolian capital, Ulaanbaatar.
A sad day for France, for Europe, for all of us here, also here in Mongolia. And it's a tragic paradox that the subject of the attack were people celebrating liberty, equality and fraternity. We all stand united with the families of the victims, with the French people and the government in its fight against violence and hatred.
President of the European Council.
Good morning. Here on my right side.
The U.S. House of Representatives passes 2 pieces of legislation linked to the international nuclear agreement with Iran on Thursday, 1 year after the landmark pact was announced, defining President Barack Obama's veto threat. Voting largely along party lines, the Republican-controlled House voted 246 to 179 to pass a new set of sanctions on Iran and 246 to 181 for a measure to block Iran's access to the U.S. financial system, including use of the dollar. The House on Wednesday passed a bill to bar the U.S. purchase of heavy water, also with little backing from Democrats. Heavy water is a non-radioactive byproduct that making nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. The Obama administration said in April the United States would buy $8.6 billion worth of heavy water from Iran, angering Republicans who called it a subsidy of the country's nuclear program. The measures were among the last the House passed before Congress left Washington for a 7-week summer recess. There was no word on when or whether the measures would be taken up in the Senate. Every congressional Republican and several of Obama's fellow Democrats opposed the nuclear deal between Iran, the United States and other powers announced in July 2015, in which Tehran agreed to curtail its nuclear program in exchange for relief from crippling international sanctions. Since then, Republican has repeatedly offered sanctions bill and other Iran-related legislation that Democrats dismiss as bids to score political points by undermining a deal seen as a potential foreign policy legacy for Obama. Republicans say they want to punish Iran for actions including its ballistic missile test and send a strong message that Tehran should abide by its international commitments. Republican White House hopeful Donald Trump will name Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his vice president running mate on Friday, several U.S. media outlets report.
Fellow Hoosiers, I give you the next president of the United States of America.
Looks like Donald Trump has picked his running mate. Several media outlets, including Roll Call, the New York Times, and CBS, are reporting the Republican White House hopeful will name Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his vice presidential pick. Roll Call cited an unidentified Republican with direct knowledge of the decision to choose the 57-year-old former U.S. congressman.
Hi, folks.
According to the news outlet, Trump was impressed with Pence's calm manner and his experience on Capitol Hill and as governor. The two Republicans spent time this month testing their chemistry at the governor's residence in Indiana.
How's your governor doing, by the way? Good?
Trump's decision to choose Pence is seen as one that could appeal to conservatives and boost his chances in a competitive state. The two appeared together at a rally in Indiana earlier in the week. Pence had backed Senator Ted Cruz in April before the Indiana primary, but he praised the real estate mogul and said he would work on behalf of the eventual Republican nominee.
We need clear-minded leadership.
The Republican governor is seen as a safe choice, popular among conservatives with Midwestern appeal and the ability to rally more party faithful behind Trump. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and New Jersey Governor Chris Christie were also rumored to be on Trump's shortlist. Trump has said he will formally announce his VP pick on Friday morning in Manhattan.
Viewers, France is mourning Hollande. Clinton slams Trump's comments on Latinos. Fireworks light up Eiffel Tower on Basel Day. FBI Homeland Security Chief preparing for violence at conventions. Froome retains Tour lead despite Ventox chaos. Viewers, let's move to the next news. French President François Hollande calls an attack in the resort town of Nice a terrorist assault and vows to continue fighting against extremists. French President François Hollande condemned an attack in the southern resort town in Nice, in which at least 80 people were killed when a truck was driven into a crowd of people. Hollande said the attack was clearly a terrorist assault and that the state of emergency imposed since a previous attack on Paris last November would be extended for another 3 months. France is affiliated by the new tragedy. It is horrified by what just happened. This monstrosity that consists of using a truck to deliberately kill dozens of people who were simply here to celebrate July 14th. France is mourning, it is afflicted, but it is strong and it will always be stronger, I assure you, than the fanatic who wants to strike it today. Hollande spoke after an emergency meeting in the early hours of Friday morning. The truck was driven at high speed into dense crowd who were watching a firework display on the country's national Basel Day holiday.
La France est affligée par cette nouvelle tragédie. Elle est horrifiée par ce qui vient de se produire. Cette monstruosité qui consiste à utiliser un camion pour tuer, délibérément tuer, des dizaines de personnes qui venaient simplement pour fêter le 14 juillet. La France, elle est éplorée Elle est affligée, mais elle est forte. Et elle sera toujours plus forte, je vous l'assure, que les fanatiques qui veulent aujourd'hui la frapper.
Ahead of the Republican convention's U.S. Democratic presumptive nominee Hillary Clinton rallies Latino voter support against Republican rival Donald Trump.
I remember after the last election,
Democratic presumptive nominee Hillary Clinton criticized Republicans for wanting to nominate someone who thinks Latino outreach is tweeting a picture of a taco bowl ahead of next week's Republican National Convention in Cleveland. In the first week of this campaign, he said that immigrants from Mexico are drug dealers, rapists, murderers, carriers of infectious diseases. He referred to a Latin contestant in his Miss Universe pageant as Miss Housekeeping, Clinton said. Speaking at the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, Clinton said this election was unlike any other and that most must be done in defeat and rally support against her Republican rival.
the Republicans commissioned a major report asking what did they do wrong that they had lost the presidency and what would they need to do in order to win next time. Some of you might remember one of the conclusions was that Republicans had to work harder to appeal to Latino voters. Now, next week in Cleveland, they will nominate someone who thinks Latino outreach is tweeting a picture of a taco bowl. What a difference a few years make. Donald Trump is temperamentally unfit to be President of the United States. Let's just remember why that is so. In the first weeks of his campaign, he said that immigrants from Mexico are drug dealers, rapists, murderers, carriers of infectious disease. He referred to a Latina contestant in his Miss Universe pageant as Miss Housekeeping. He insists, and I quote, "This is a country where we speak English, not Spanish." Well, I have to tell you, he doesn't know much about our history and what a great opportunity we give to people from everywhere to come to this country. He criticized Jeb Bush for speaking, and I quote, Mexican. I mean, you cannot make this up. He wants to revoke the citizenship of 4 million Americans born in this country to immigrant parents, eliminate the bedrock principle in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
A massive fireworks display illuminates the Eiffel Tower in Paris to conclude Bastille Day, the French National Day. The French National Day, also known as Bastille Day, ended with a flare on Thursday with a massive fireworks display illuminating the Eiffel Tower red, white and blue. The annual Bastille Day celebrates including a traditional parade down the Champs-Élysées earlier in the day, kicked off by French President François Hollande and with dignitaries in attendance. Bastille Day on July 14th commemorates the storming of Bastille prison by angry crowds in 1789, helping launch the French Revolution. The Bastille prison, where opponents of the monarchy were kept, was targeting for symbolizing royal rule. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and FBI Director James Comey say they are preparing their agencies for the possibility of violence at upcoming political conventions.
I am concerned about the prospect of demonstrations getting out of hand. I am concerned about the possibility of violence. We have within DHS some 3,000 personnel that will be dedicated to the security of the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention, each consisting of Secret Service, TSA, Homeland Security investigations, Customs Border Protection, NPPD, Coast Guard. I know that there will be at least another 1,000 or so U.S. government personnel and hand in both places, number in Cleveland of the Ohio Guard, as well as probably thousands in terms of state and local law enforcement. We have been planning and preparing for both conventions now for over a year. As I mentioned earlier, I plan to inspect the security at both sites, Cleveland tomorrow, Philadelphia next Friday. There's a certain level of First Amendment protected activity that is guaranteed to demonstrators at national political conventions. They will be confined, it will be roped off in an isolated area, but it's something that will have a lot of security devoted to, Mr. Chairman.
Anytime there's a national spotlight on a political event in the United States, there's a risk that groups that aspire to do just that, to engage in acts of domestic terrorism, will be attracted. It's a threat we're watching very, very carefully. It's the reason we have hundreds of people focused on intelligence and deployed to Cleveland.
The U.S. State Department says it is looking forward to working with new British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson.
We're always going to be able to work with the British, no matter.
The U.S. State Department looks forward to working with Boris Johnson, appointed on Wednesday as British Foreign Secretary. A U.S. State Department spokesman said the United States will always be able to work with British officials because of its deep, abiding relationship with Britain. State Department spokesman Mark Toner said at a daily news briefing Johnson was a leading figure in the victorious Leave campaign in Britain's European Union membership referendum last month.
We're always going to be able to work with the British, no matter who is occupying the role of Foreign Secretary, because of our deep, abiding, special relationship with the United Kingdom. And we congratulate Foreign Secretary Hammond on his new role, and we look forward to engaging with Boris Johnson as the new Foreign Secretary. This is something, frankly, that goes beyond a relationship that goes beyond personalities, and it is a absolutely critical moment in certainly England's history, but also in the U.S.-UK relationship. So absolutely, we're committed to working productively going forward. The British people voted, and they voted to leave the European Union, and now our focus is on the future.
Law enforcement officers saying shooting at trucks cab before truck barrels towards Basel Day revealers. A year since the signing of a wide-ranging deal, observers say Iran has largely lived up to its side of the bargain.
It's been 1 year since the signing of a wide-ranging deal designed to stop Iran developing nuclear weapons. Now, diplomats took years to thrash out the final agreement, which faced intense criticism both in Iran and around the world. Since then, the Iranian government has largely lived up to its side of the bargain. The U.S. says the world is a safer place. But the deal is fragile, to say the least, and criticism of what was agreed and the Iranian government hasn't stopped. We'll explore all of that in a moment, but first, looks at the impact on the Iranian economy.
There are plenty of deals being made in the Grand Bazaar in Tehran, but a year after the biggest deal in Iran's recent history, many Iranians say little has changed. President Hassan Rouhani promised economic prosperity, more jobs, more choice, lower prices and greater opportunities. A year on, and the president's under pressure to deliver.
There has been no tangible achievement economically. The government is talking about single-digit inflation, but you can't feel it.
I can't say that society has experienced great economic growth, but after Rouhani took office, many good things have happened.
Free from nuclear sanctions, Iran has boosted oil exports to more than 2.5 million barrels a day, close to pre-sanctions levels. Foreign investment has increased. Meanwhile, experts say that whereas Iran might once have been able to build a nuclear bomb in a couple of months, it would now take at least a year, enough time to discover the threat and intervene. But the nuclear deal is vulnerable, and the threats lie outside the accord. Elections in the US and Iran could bring in new leaders with little sympathy for the nuclear accord, and non-nuclear sanctions continue to strangle Iran's economy. They're linked to Iran's human rights record and ballistic missile testing. Despite reassurances from Washington, investors and the international banking system have been nervous about doing business in Iran for fear of prosecution and fines.
Syrian leader confident in TV interviews as US State Secretary arrives in Moscow with proposals for military cooperation.
A lot of advancement recently.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said he has never faced pressure from Russia to step aside as US Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Moscow seeking to reveal stalled peace efforts. Speaking to NBC News in Damascus, Assad insisted his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had never raised the issue of his departure or a political transition. Only the Syrian people define who is going to be the president, when to come and when to go. They never said a single word regarding this, he said. Assad's fate is a key question in efforts to bring about a negotiated settlement of Syria's 5-year civil war. Hope for the existing peace process rests on the UN-backed blueprint sketched by the 22 nations, US and Russian-led International Syria Support Group.
So there will be a new president. There are two main choices. One of them is Donald Trump. What do you know of Mr. Trump?
Nothing, just what I heard in the media and during the campaign. That's what I say. We don't have to waste our time hearing what they say in their campaign. They're going to change after they become elected, and this is where we have to start evaluating the president after the campaign, not during the campaign.
The report accuses both sides in the conflict of indiscriminate shelling on civilian areas and summary executions. Both sides of the conflict in Ukraine are guilty of indiscriminately shelling civilian areas and carrying out summary execution of both combatant and civilians, according to a new report released by the United Nations. The 2-year conflict in eastern Ukraine between government forces and Russia-backed rebels has killed up to 2,000 civilians. Nearly 90% of them is shelling of residential areas. The report released by the official of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights on Thursday said. The report also cites executions by both Ukrainian force and rebel groups of significant numbers of people. The victims of executions, including people allegedly affiliated with the sympathetic to the opposing side, as well as combatants who had surrendered or were out of action. There need to be strong investigation in order to identify perpetrators of crime committed, to bring justice to the victims and their families, to the end of continued suffering, and at the end of the day to ensure there is accountability in this country. Fiona Fazer, head of the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission for Ukraine, told the Associated Press. The report said that the majority of the incident is question happened in the late 2014 and early 2015. A Ukrainian Foreign Ministry statement said the country highly values the work of UN human rights monitors in the country, but it focused blame on these rebels. The ministry claimed that the report found the majority of civilian death was due to rebel artillery and said Ukrainian forces are banned from firing on rebel positions near civilian areas. A decision in validating China's vast claim in the South China Sea was a crowning glory that renews faith in international law, the Philippines' top lawyer said on Friday in Manila's strongest comment yet on its sweeping win. The remarks by Solicitor General George Calida follow 2 days of carefully calibrated response from the Philippines and are almost certain to irritate China's further. Manila has so far been keen not to rock the boat in the hope of stirring dialogue towards Beijing, allowing it to exercise what the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled were its sovereign maritime rights. It confirms that no one state can claim virtually an entire sea. The award is a historic win not only for the Philippines. It renews humanity's faith in a rules-based global order, Calida told a forum on South China Sea. The award opens a horizon of possibilities for all stakeholders. The award is a crowning glory of international law. China has refused to recognize Tuesday's ruling and did not take part in its proceeding. It has reacted angrily to call by Western countries for the decision to adhere to. China's foreign ministry on Friday said Beijing's position on the case had the support of Laos, the current chair of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, a regional bloc long dogged by discover over how to deal with China's maritime assertiveness. The verdict was discussed on Thursday between Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and Lao Prime Minister Thongloun Sisoulith ahead a regional summit in Mongolia. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was accorded a red carpet reception as she arrived Ulaanbaatar on Thursday on a 3-day official visit to Mongolia to attend the 11th Asia-Europe Summit. The 2-day summit begins at Shangri-La Hotel in the Mongolian capital of Ulaanbaatar Friday. A VVIP flight of Biman Bangladesh Airlines carrying the Prime Minister and the members of entourage landed at Chengiz Khan International Airport at Ulaanbaatar at 7:30 p.m. Bangladeshi Ambassador to Mongolia Fazlul Karim and Chief of Staff of President to Mongolia and Ambassador at Large P. Thangsang received the Prime Minister. Later, the Prime Minister was given a static guard of honor by the Mongolian Armed Force. From the airport, the Prime Minister, in a ceremonial motorcade, was taken to ASEM Villa, where she will staying during the visit. Earlier, the VVIP flight of Biman Bangladesh Airlines carrying the Prime Minister and her entourage took off from Hazrat Shah Jalal International Airport at 11:30 a.m. During the summit, Hasina and her Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe will co-chair a special discussion to be presented by other global leaders. On Friday, Hasina will attend the inaugural session of the summit. President of Mongolia Taskiajin Elbegdorj will receive Sheikh Hasina on her arrival at summit venue at Shangri-La Hotel. The Prime Minister will attend the first and second plenary session of the summit and deliver his speech on 20 years of ASEM partnership for the future through connectivity. The Prime Minister will hold meeting with Swiss President John Schneider, Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Foreign Minister of Italy Paolo Gentiloni on Friday. She will also attend a banquet to be hosted by Mongolian President in honor of the guest at Mongolian Jain at Assam village. On Saturday, the Prime Minister will hold meeting with Myanmar President Hit Kyan, Indian Vice President Hamid Ansari, President of European Council Donald Tusk and President of European Commission Jean-Claude Juncker. She will also join a retreat session of ASEM leaders. The Bangladesh Prime Minister in the meeting with the world's leader is likely to highlight the country's security situation and the government's firm commitment to tackle terrorism and extremism in the aftermath of 2 recent terror attacks in Bangladesh. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has congratulated newly appointed British Prime Minister Theresa May and invited her to visit Bangladesh at a mutually convenient time. "It's more heartening for me to see you leading the United Kingdom," the Prime Minister said in a message to Theresa May on Thursday. Prime Minister Hasina said there is a scope of further development in Bangladesh-UK relationship through trade, investment, education, and knowledge sharing. I'm confident that your visit would ensure further impetus to our relation and take them to a greater height, she said. Her British counterpart, if she visits Bangladesh, would be able to see for herself the overall progress made by Bangladesh, practically through mainstreaming and empowering women. The Prime Minister extended heartiest felicitation on Theresa May's appointment as the Prime Minister of the UK and the Northern Ireland, which she considered as most deserving election as the leader of the Conservative Party. Hasina said the relation between Bangladesh and UK have been mature, strong, enduring. The Prime Minister said that she is happy to note that Bangladesh and UK are working in partnership for strengthening the democratic ethos, empowering the vulnerable, encountering terrorism, addressing the impact of climate change, among other global challenges of their time. Viewers, now the business news. A rally in financial stock helped lift the Dow and S&P 500 to records high. JP Morgan Chase's strong earnings spurred financial stocks.
A rally in financial stocks drove the Dow and S&P 500 to new record highs. Spurring on the financials, strong earnings from JP Morgan Chase, the U.S.'s largest bank. Also, the Bank of England decided to unexpectedly keep interest rates steady. That sent British stocks down, other European stocks closed higher, and U.S. stocks rose. Christina Hooper of Allianz Global Investors.
What we saw was a positive reaction because it really, at the end of the day, said that the Brexit decision wasn't really that bad for the economy. If it had been, the BOE would have been much quicker to act.
Firm economic data also supported stocks. The number of Americans filing jobless claims unexpectedly held steady last week. And rising energy costs pushed producer prices up in June to their biggest gain in a year. Strong fixed income trading boosted quarterly revenue at JP Morgan Chase. Profits slipped but beat estimates. Japanese messaging app operator Line surged on its stock market debut. The stock climbed as high as 36%, valuing the company at roughly $9 billion. Bayer sweetened its offer for Monsanto. The German drug company raising its bid for the Roundup herbicide producer by $3 to $125 a share.
The European Commission says Alphabet's Google is abusing its dominant position and blocking advertisement from rivals.
The European Commission charged Alphabet's Google with blocking ads from rivals. This relates to Google's AdSense platform. Google acts as an intermediary for websites of online businesses, with searches producing results that include search ads. European Commissioner for Competition, Margherita Vestager.
They hindered competition and they stifled, of course, also choice and innovation to the detriment of consumers.
This marks the third time EU regulators have brought up an antitrust charge against Google. Regulators also reinforced their earlier preliminary conclusion that Google had favored its own comparison shopping service over its rivals in search results. Scott Kessler of S&P Global Market Intelligence.
Really all you have to look at is how big and how successful and how powerful Google has been in Europe. In fact, with market share in some countries far above that in the US, particularly when you look at, say, search activity and search advertising. So I do think that Europe is trying to kind of level the competitive playing field.
If found guilty, Google could face fines of up to 10% of its global turnover for each case.
In another blow to Volkswagen, California's chief air regulator has rejected a proposal recall plan to fix 16,000 vehicles equipped with cheat emission devices.
Another blow to Volkswagen after US regulators reject a plan to recall 16,000 vehicles in California. VW wants to fix models made between 2009 and 2016 to cheat emissions tests. They include 3-litre diesel models from VW, Audi and Porsche. But California's chief air regulator said the plan was insufficient, taking VW by surprise. He wants more time to gather data, until December at the earliest.
VW says that the decision by California is just a procedural one, and that negotiations continue and that they will come to a solution. But of course this has dragged on for quite a while already, and it would be great for VW and for VW shareholders, obviously, if we could move more decisively towards a resolution of this issue.
The German automaker has been making some progress with Emissionsgate. Last month it reached a settlement with regulators and owners of 2-litre vehicles worth up to $15.3 billion. It will be keen to regain the trust of customers and investors, but it could still end up having to buy back the vehicles, and that would cost billions.
Viewers, now the science, technology and environment news. A microscale Pac-Man maze filled with minuscule prey and predators that fight to the death has been invented by Norwegian scientists in a bid to learn more about how microbes behave in their natural habitat.
Launched in 1980, Pac-Man is one of the most famous computer games of all time. University College of South East Norway researchers have recreated it in microscopic form, using microbes. This version is less than 1 millimetre in diameter. Single-celled ciliate and euglena species swim through a maze of nutrient-rich fluid. Multicellular rotifers chase them through the labyrinth. The team says the project was fun, but had a serious scientific purpose. Making the microbes overcome obstacles could help us learn how they move in their natural habitat. The team now wants to digitally trace the microbes' path round the maze in a bid to understand their decision-making.
Lockheed Martin Group's F-35 fighter jet has the most powerful fighter engine in the world, according to the developers Pratt & Whitney.
Lockheed Martin's F-35 fighter jet is the star attraction at this year's Farnborough Air Show. It's perhaps the most sophisticated jet ever built. It's also one of the most expensive, at over $100 million each. A large part of that cost is the F-135 engine that powers it.
The F-35 is the most powerful, most advanced fighter jet in the world today, and it is powered by our F-135 engine, which is the most powerful fifth-generation fighter engine available in the world today.
The F-35 jet comes in 3 variants. The F-35B, seen here, is known as a STOVL aircraft, which stands for Short Takeoff Vertical Landing. It can take off from a far shorter runway than conventional jets and land vertically like a helicopter. The F-135 engine makes this possible.
So here you have an engine that it also has the ability to generate supersonic thrust, as well as has stealth characteristics, as well as being able to adapt and perform the STOVL landing, or the short takeoff or vertical landing operations.
The engine generates more than 40,000 pounds of thrust and is capable of speeds up to Mach 1.6. That's about 544 miles per hour. Its makers, Pratt & Whitney, recently won $1.5 billion in funding to help take the technology further.
We are working with the U.S. government through the Pentagon to develop additional capability and demonstrate new technologies that we can bring to the F-135 that will keep us a generation ahead.
Numerous countries have placed orders, with Lockheed expecting to sell 3,000 F-35s in the coming decades. Meanwhile, this F-35 will continue to make a lot of noise at the Farnborough Air Show, which runs until July 17th.
Moving wildfire in Tiburon, New Mexico destroys homes and forces evacuation. Firefighters in New Mexico are battling a raging wildfire that has destroyed several homes in the Tiburon area south of Cloudcroft. Hundreds have been forced to evacuate. So far, no injuries have been reported, but 2 fire trucks were consumed in the fast-moving flames. Viewers, now the entertainment news. Woody Allen calls on the trio of Parker Posey, Blake Lively and Kristen Stewart for his new film Cafe Society. The cast and Allen celebrates the film's opening at a red carpet screening in New York. After opening this year's prestigious Cannes Film Festival, veteran writer and director Woody Allen brought his latest movie Cafe Society to New York on Wednesday, July 13th for a red carpet screening. The film, starring Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart, follows one man's move to Hollywood in the 1930s with dreams for working in the movie industry.
Actually, what I wanted to do, it was originally conceived in my mind as a novel on film. I wanted it to be a book on film. So when you read a book, you come in contact with a lot of different characters. You follow them over a few years, and you see some and then others and back to those. And I tried to give it that structure.
Unrequited love kills more people in any year than tuberculosis.
Do you want to try me?
Listen, I'm so lonely. I would have been happy just to talk, but now I'm even too tired for that. You like jazz music?
At 2 in the morning.
At any time in the morning.
Love is not rational. You fall in love. You lose control.
So I don't like to rehearse, and I don't like to do a lot of takes, and I don't like to do a lot of angles. I like to get in, shoot, and go home and watch the basketball game.
Well, working with Woody is so interesting because he has such beautiful dialogue, yet he encourages you to improvise. He makes it so loose. It's almost like being in a play.
Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living, but the examined one is no bargain.
Yes? Life is a comedy written by a sadistic comedy writer.
Game of Thrones leads the Emmy Awards nomination with 23 nods, while limited series The People v. O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story and Fargo also landed top notes for US television highest honors.
Use me for your lies. Those men respect you.
The contenders for the 2016 Primetime Emmy Awards have been announced, and Game of Thrones led nominees with 23 overall nods. Among its nominations, the medieval fantasy series garnered recognition for Outstanding Drama. It won that category last year.
I should have killed myself this morning.
The People vs. O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story, which follows the details of the 1995 Simpson murder trial, scored 22 nominations in the limited series categories, including 2 Best Actor nods for Cuba Gooding Jr. and Courtney B. Vance, and a Best Actress nod for Sarah Paulson. The FX crime drama Fargo was the third most nominated production with 18 nods, including a bid for Best Limited Series and a nod for Kirsten Dunst as Best Actress in that category.
Your generosity is overwhelming.
In the comedy series category, HBO's political satire Veep led with 17 nods, including Best Actress for Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She's won for Veep every year since 2012. This year's Emmy winners will be announced at a ceremony in Los Angeles on September 18th.
Geode, which symbolizes the solid foundation that we have between our two countries.
Oscar-nominated actress Anna Archer talks about playing Hanoi Jane Fonda in her new play and weighs in on the US election race.
Oscar-nominated actress Anne Archer steps into the shoes of one of her contemporaries in new London play The Trial of Jane Fonda.
Imagine a foreign power.
Seen here rehearsing for the drama, which has just opened in the West End, Archer plays fellow US actress Jane Fonda. The play is based on the true story of Fonda's meeting with a group of US-Vietnam war vets, upset with Fonda's anti-Vietnam stance seen years earlier. Archer told Reuters it's a story that's just as relevant today.
I think it's a story of war and peace, of why do we fight these unnecessary wars? Why do we get involved? What are the losses there? I mean, we ended up in Iraq. I mean, for what? You could really relate the Vietnam War to Iraq in many, many ways. 57,000 American soldiers died in Vietnam. 3 million Vietnamese died in that war. You look at what has happened in the Middle East. I think we all can relate to this story around the world, and I think it's a story that must be told.
Archer also weighed in on this year's US presidential race, showing support for Hillary Clinton.
Well, it certainly is a circus, isn't it? Yeah. Obviously, I'm for Hillary Clinton without question, not just because she's a woman, but I'm in agreement with her policies, and Trump is an odd duck. A very odd duck, and it's beyond me how the American public, any American public, could be behind him. I don't understand it. But
The Trial of Jane Fonda will run at the Park Theatre in London until August the 20th.
I'm hesitant to talk about Trump because...
Viewers, now the sports news. Defending champion Chris Froome retained the overall leader's yellow jersey on the Tour de France despite being left without a bike following an incident involving a motorbike in a virtual finale to the 12th stage on Thursday. The Briton's bike was broken in a pile-up close to the finish, and the team Skyrider began running up the slope of the Mount Ventoux before grabbing a service bike which did not fit. Froome was then given a spare team Sky bike on which he completed the 178-kilometer stage, losing over a minute to his main rival, only for the race jury to rule that he would be credited with the same time as the two riders he was with when the incident occurred. Chris Froome and Richie Porte has been given the same time as Bok Mollem due to the incident in the finale. Froome retains the yellow jersey, organizers said in a statement. BMC rider Porte, who was leading Froome, and Dutchman Mollema crashed into a TV motorbike that has helped up by the crowd on the road. Mollema and Froome also tumbled, and the Breton's bike was broken in the incident. The overall lead was first handed to Breton Adam Yates before the standings were updated, and Froome was handed the yellow jersey on the podium. I am very happy with the commemorized decision. I think it was the right thing to do, thanks to the jury and thanks to the organizers, Froome told reporters. Yates added, I am happy with the decision. I would not want to take the jersey like that. I wanted to take it with my legs. Phil Mickelson surged up to the leaderboard at the British Open on Thursday, grabbing the first day lead and a share of the record for the best score in the major championship. Aided by British on 10, 14, 16 and 17 on Royal Troon Tricky back 9, the 46-year-old American posted a 63, equivalent the record low for major first set by Johnny Miller in the 1973 US Open. Mickelson came within a fraction of an inch of breaking the record outright. His curling 15-foot put over Brady circled the hole on 18 before settling just outside it. That put on 18 was an opportunity to do something historical, Mickelson said at news conference. I knew it, and with a foot to go I thought I had done it, and then I had the heartbreak and I didn't, and I watched the ball leap out. It was wow, that thing. It was still good enough for an 8-under effort and a bogey-free round, and it put him 3 ahead of competitor Patrick Reed and Martin Keimer of Germany. All three seemed to be well positioned for the second day, but Keimer at least was not getting ahead of himself. It's only a quarter of a marathon, he said. It's a good start, and it's very good start, but tomorrow we will see how the weather will turn out and then play another good round. That's all you can do. Reed's early 66, a round punctuated by an eagle from the fairway on the par 4 third hole, said the clubhouse led for much of the day. He has no intention of changing his approach, although the weather is forecast to turn wet and cold after Thursday's warm sun and gentle winds. The college football season is still weeks from kicking off, but on Thursday fans were dealt a devastating blow. One of the single most explosive offensive players in college football won't actually be playing much offensive at all in 2016. I talked to Coach Hilton the other day and we came to the decision that I'm going to play defensive back, focus primarily on that, UCA's Adoree Jackson said at Pac-12 Media Days, and then do something returning, and if I want to go on offense I can. What the USC secondary just gained, the rest of the college football just lost, as Jackson was one of the single exciting players on both sides of the ball in the sports last year. While he is known preliminary as one of the best cornerback in the country, Jackson made 27 catches and scored 2 touchdowns at receivers in 2015. Marko Grujic scored on his debut for Liverpool as they sealed a 5-0 victory over Fleetwood in a pre-season friendly on Wednesday evening.
Now in game number 2, Danny Ings doesn't have goal number 2. It's a really good save. Here's Mane again. He has space and he has Moreno, and it's going to come all the way towards Marko Grujic, and Marko Grujic is off and running in a Liverpool shirt. On towards Grujic, who's been very lively. That's come back off the woodwork. Another chance for Moreno. And Lovren. It's tipped behind by Neil. It comes towards Grujic, well saved by the goalkeeper. That's Lucas, it's a lovely ball. Here's Kent. He was unselfish, and it creates a second goal for Liverpool. Now Woodburn goes. He's got one, he nearly got himself another. A really good win by Lucas. Firmino rides one challenge, rides 2 challenges, finds Ryan Kent, and Lucas! Well, there's a collector's item, a goal for Lucas. And of course, in the history books, it won't go down as an official goal. That's a decent ball. And Woodburn again. Cairns did well, but Firmino's there. And Liverpool score again. It's Roberto Firmino. Now we have space. Woodburn, his first touch is decent. Firmino waits, and Liverpool have scored 5.
Viewers, let's have a look at Millennium TV News Recap. Terror prop begins in Nice attack. Obama responds to critics in conversation on race and police. EU stands with France, Tusk. US House passes Iran sanctions, financial service measures. You are up to date with our top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log on www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you and stay with Millennium TV. Allah Hafiz.